Well, I'm not really doing anything here other than taking a movie, but with me are Jamie Fischer, our research director, Jeff Greenwood in the center there, our education director, and we have Oliver Loud Stubbs with us from Momogo, who is one of our absolutely favorite volunteers. And Jamie, could you tell us what you're doing? Are you guys making lunch? What's going on here?
Well, yeah. So these are scientific study skins. They're prepared by a gentleman by the name of Ed Briggs, who worked at Flanders Nature Center, and when he passed away, his wife decided that she'd like to give these specimens to another nature center, and so we have them. They're actually quite valuable. They tell us a lot about the animals that live in this area, and the tags that are associated with it have data on them so that we can understand when they were collected and maybe some of their body size characteristics and measurements. But we had a problem, and the problem was that we had a lot of mold growing on some of these specimens. This is what happens when specimens sit in people's attics for just a little too long. So what we're doing is we're just taking ethyl alcohol and small paint brushes, and we're just cleaning off the mold. It's a very tedious, sort of painstaking process, but the results are actually quite dramatic.
So how long will it take to remove all of that?
Well, if there's a lot of it on, it may take us several hours and a couple days to do this project thoroughly and completely. But that's why having Oliver here is really helpful, because we can do many tasks at once, and he can keep asking us questions as we go along. But the product in the end is a well cared for specimen that tells us a whole bunch about the wildlife that live here in Connecticut. And so that's why we're doing it.
I see some really interesting specimens on the table. Can you point out a couple of interests that people most likely will rarely, if ever, see here in Connecticut?
Well, there's a few here.
Besides Jeff.
There are a few here that are actually quite interesting. Ed Briggs was pretty diverse with his collection, but it seems like he may have went down to Texas and picked up an armadillo here, and he prepared it as a round skin. It's a really good specimen, a good example of how a round skin is prepared, because basically we take out the carcass and we stitch it back up, but we put cotton through it, and we preserve it with borax or some other kind of product that dries out the skin but preserves it for the long term. There's pieces of wire and metal inside of it so that they stay rigid. As you can see, there's a pattern to the way they're arranged, and the main idea here is that we can fit many specimens into a drawer this way versus a taxidermy mount, which is made to look alive. They take up a lot more space, and they're made to look alive, but they have their place. But scientific study skins tell us a whole bunch of information, but they don't take up a whole lot of space. We have a red squirrel and gray squirrel. We have a short-tailed shrew and a meadow vole. Here's a southern flying squirrel that he collected here in Connecticut, that dorsal-ventrally flattened tail. We have a muskrat. Here's a muskrat hide that was just stretched out like many fur trappers will prepare it. And here's a round skin. So there's the two different kinds right there. We have some real small ones here. This is a small little masked shrew. Sorex cinereus is the scientific name. You can see that it has a real long tail for its body length, but it's about the size of my pinky finger. So real high metabolic rate. An interesting mammal, quite common in Connecticut.
What do we have over here, Jamie?
Well,
that's something I'm not very interested in.
Hint, hint, and here are a few bats. We have a long-eared bat, kind of old. These are a little faded because they were put behind glass and allowed to fade, but we can still get some information from them. We have a red bat, we have a hoary bat, things that we don't typically see a lot of in Connecticut, but again, you know, Ed did a really good job. He knew what was important, and he knew what he wanted to teach people, so he made these specimens so he can show people what they're like. I mean, to tell people that a small mammal like a masked shrew lives in their backyard, they have no idea, because it's so small, they very rarely ever see it. But when you put it in a skin like this, you can actually see what when we say small mammal and what small really means.